We all know the Genshin Impact lore is deep and complex, and one can be lost while digging for information and not understanding quite well some aspects of the lore. And that leads me to the topic of this video, which is how Genshin, or should I say Hoyoverse, handles the lore. It is known that the lore is literally scattered everywhere in the game, and that is a kinda huge problem for casual players that play through our conquests, story quests, and even hangouts, but still are missing some pieces of the puzzle. And of course, I'm not talking about people who willingly skip through dialogues and, everything, so that's on them. They could be just casual players and still be interested a little bit about the lore, or new players, and this category has the most disadvantage. The thing about Genshin's distribution of lore and understanding it well really depends on when did you start playing the game. For instance, if you just started playing now, oh gosh, you missed a lot and you have a lot to catch up to. But honestly, catching up on the lore is not as bad as missing it completely. And by that I mean not playing the important events that really contributed a lot into the lore. Not only for characters' depth, but also for the general story of the game. And to reinforce my statement here, I will be giving some examples, and the first one will be about Xiao. While he is present in the Liyue Archon quests, he has his own story quests and character stories, there is still some missing details about him to know. And I wouldn't really be calling them details as in new information to know, but rather just his character development. Traveler first met him in the Liyue Archon quest, but he sees him after during the first Lantern Rites, which, well, new players completely missed. And then the Moon Chase Festival, then the Chasm Archon quest, and so on. So even though Xiao had little to no screen time in some of these events, it really showcased his character development, especially towards Traveler, and also towards himself. From being completely reserved to himself and not wanting to have contact with anyone, from declining multiple times Traveler's invitation to watch the lanterns with them, to actually wanting to spend time with them. Those little changes were subtle yet noticeable if you played through each event. And you may ask, why are we even talking about Xiao's character development here? Well, simply because this is the easiest example I can give first to understand more where I'm going to, and how temporary events really help on catching on some little details to understand more the lore and a character. That leads me to my second example, who is Albedo. Unlike Xiao, in Albedo's case, missing his temporary winter events is a great deal, since the entirety of his lore was showcased in his temporary events, and that is really unfortunate. He as a character has one of the most interesting lores in game, yet it was all wasted in temporary events. Let's take the Chalk Prince and the Dragon, which was supposed to be played after his story quests, but now it is no more. When you really play his story quests, you do not really learn much about him, and the sad thing is, it is the only permanent thing that you can play about Albedo. The Chalk Prince and the Dragon reveals a little bit about Durin, and then we have Shadows Amid Snowstorm, which is his second winter event, that was absolutely phenomenal. That revealed and confirmed that Albedo is indeed a homunculus, an artificial human being created by none other than Rain Daughter, or Gold. And the imposter Albedo was one of her failed experiments that were thrown into Durin's stomach. And that Durin is kind of like Albedo's brother in a family sense of way, since Rain Daughter was like mother to them since she was their creator. And yes, this entirety of lore was wasted on temporary events. Like, imagine new players not getting to experience this and to know this. Like, yes, you can go and watch YouTube videos about it and stuff, but like, it's not the same as actually playing it and experience it for yourself. And here comes my third example, which is like Albedo's case, Kaidahara Kazuha and Scaramouche. And I mentioned both of them together since their stories actually intertwine. But I'll be starting with Kazuha first. We first met him during our travels to Inazuma and got to know about his friend's tragedy and introduced to the Vision Hunt decree, that the details of it and Kazuha's entire life and struggle of feeling like a disappointment and useless and incompetent, and like everything he went through while he was still in the Kaidahara clan, and we witnessed how he fell from grace little by little, not to mention the struggle he and his friend went through fleeing from the Vision Hunt decree. And yeah, you guessed it right, all of this was only witnessed during the second Golden Apple Archipelago that was also a temporary event. But anyways, his lore gets a little bit deeper than that. While you may already read about him being a noble from a fallen clan in his character's story, they really never got deep into it or even mentioned the reason of the decline, and here comes the Urodori Festival to answer all our questions. which is also a temporary event for some reason. This festival not only revealed to us the nature of Kazuha's clan and the problems they went through, but also that Scaramouche had a big role into what happened. He was executing some sort of revenge on the Raiden Gokuden, who are 5 smithing schools in Inazuma, and that the Kaidahara clan was part of them. But somehow stopped and gave up on his revenge plan when he saw Kazuha's great-grandfather. Now here comes another problem. Even if you played the Irodori festival, there were 2 types of people. The ones who were already aware of Scaramouche's lore from the Husk of Opulent Dreams artifact set, well, we'll get into that later. And the second category, the people who were completely ignorant about it. And why is that relevant, you may ask? Well, simply, if you were aware about his lore, you would know the reason why he wanted to execute revenge on the Raiden Gokuden, and even why he stopped when he saw Kazuha's great-grandfather. The revelation for both parties, though, was that Scaramouche's friend that was killed and mentioned in his lore was an ancestor of Kazuha. And by the time I'm recording this, we're playing the Windbloom Festival. And guess what? We got introduced to some really great information that will be thrown away the moment the event is over. And the important of them all is the voice Traveler heard at the end of the Sumeru Archon quest. It was a witch named Nicole from the Hexen Circle, a secret society composed of witches, including Alice and Rain Daughter. They were friends with the Animal Archon Barbados and just had tea parties in some place. So why this entire lore and huge amount of information was thrown away in temporary events? It is really a shame that new players don't get to experience this by themselves. Now, as I mentioned before, the lore is scattered everywhere, and the first way was temporary events that I talked about. Now let's move on to my second point. Research and digging up lore. Now the good thing about this one, it is not temporary, and you can find it like in a lot of things and anytime you want. But it is still inconvenient for casual players that do not really want to do a lot of research. Remember when I mentioned there were 2 types of people during the Irodori festivals? The one who were aware of Scaramouche's lore and the ones who weren't? Now this kind of information can be found in literally anything in the game, any object, any artifact set, any book. And that's the thing, not a lot of people mind or like pay attention to reading the description of it. And even simpler things such as character stories, since not everyone gets every single character, so eventually they do not read them. Name card descriptions, not everyone reads those, and smaller things like that. Now some of you may have heard of or known Before the Sun and Moon book, which contains a lot of secrets about the Primordial One, the First Throne, the Heavenly Principles and all. This book was only obtainable by doing the Enkanomiya quest, which was also a temporary one. And we can never forget about the Unreconciled Stars event, where Scaramouche dropped a lore bomb on us about the stars and sky being fake, a huge hoax and a lie, and they never elaborated on that. Not until later on in the Sumeru Archon quest, where Dottore told Nahida about this information in exchange for the Gnosis. But it was a private convo that we didn't get to hear, and we were still left in the dark after all. Not to mention there is an entire Genshin Impact webtoon that covers what happened in Mondstadt 1 or 2 years before the Traveler arrives there. It covers the backstory of Lady Vanessa and how she got to meet Venti and became the Lionfang Knights and founded the Knights of Favonius. It covers the backstory of Kale, the backstory of Kaya and Diluc, and not a lot of people know about its existence. Because it's so sad, you miss a lot of context about a lot of things. And since I mentioned Kaya and Diluc's situation, there was this mini event about Diluc's Dark Knight hero kinda skin. There were some letters from Kaya to Diluc during that period of time when Diluc was out of Mondstadt, and Diluc actually replied to him. And while reading the letters, you just can tell how much they actually care about each other deeply. They're not those enemies that hate each other kind of brothers that people tend to think about them. And from the same event, we learned the nature of Kaya's eye patch, that he actually inherited it from his grandfather, since his clan, the Alberics, were the ones who stepped to take on the throne and to become the ruler of Kanaria, even though they're not royal blood by nature. And we also got to know that Kaya's eye that is hidden behind his eye patch was just a little bit injured from that time he fought with Diluc in that tragic night. And it wasn't even injured that badly, and Kaya was just playing tricks on Diluc and to make him feel a little bit guilty, but Diluc was well aware of that. Long story short, the way Hoyoverse handles the lore is a little bit messy, if I may say, and certainly not new players friendly. But I guess we can do nothing about it. Well, I wished they made like the quests and lore stuff permanent, and just the challenges, rewards, and everything like temporary. Just like they did with the art conquest, like the Chasm one. In a way, you do not only miss information story-wise, but also just some wholesome character interactions. For instance, it wouldn't make sense, for example, for people who did not play the Orodori festival to see others talking about Kazuha and Albedo in the same sentence. They would be like, that doesn't make sense, they do not even know each other. Well, guess what? They do, and you weren't there to witness it. Well, sadly, it is what it is, and I just wanted to talk about it since it's been on my mind for a long time. Alright then, that's all I had to say, and I'll see you guys in next videos.